So my, Thank you. So my name is Susie Estrada. I am the School Improvement Programs and Special Education Parent Engagement Specialist with the Utah State Board of Education. And today we're going to be talking about family and community engagement, but we're going to really be thinking about data and how to utilize data in a meaningful way, intentional way, and then how to really be transparent with families on the why we're collecting data and then how their feedback is going to be used. So one of the major projects, one of the big tasks that I have here with the state is overseeing our Indicator 8 parent involvement survey. And I mentioned today earlier when I was meeting with the school, it's one of the things I get to be really nerdy about. It's very exciting to see, where we were, where we are, and then monitoring that progress. Indicator 8 Parent Involvement Survey is specifically for special education, but it does function as an indicator for just school-wide practice. Where are we as a school? Yes, it's program specific, but is that a symptom of a school-wide culture and practices that we can implement as a school? So data in that way is very similar across the board, whether you're in early education or after school or whatever it might be, where data, even when it's program specific, can help inform the direction of other programs, the creation of other programs, policy, professional development, workshops for parents. And then this workshop is really going to think about how we can set clear goals and how to measure achievement towards those goals beyond just survey and testing. If at any point you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. I don't think you all can unmute. I usually love to have conversations, but feel free to put it in the chat or in the Q&A, and I can pause and we can address those at any time. We have plenty of time today, and I do love to talk. So here we go. So family and community engagement, just a quick definition of this is your first time really diving into the field. It's a full, equal, and equitable partnership among families, educators, and community partners to promote children's learning and development from birth through college and career. Earlier in the keynote, we heard about from diapers to diplomas, and I love that. I want a graphic and I want it everywhere. Just a baby in diapers holding a diploma, that would be great. But really paying attention to that word equitable. So we don't want to just share information or ask for feedback in a one size fits all manner. Going back to the Indicator 8 survey, we look at our responses representative of all of the families in Utah? And the answer is no, it's not. But we have made a lot of progress in that area. So part of that is sitting down and looking at that data and not only seeing, are we reaching our target? Because as a state, we have for the last 2 years. But when we break apart that data and start thinking about equity and access, are we really getting information and feedback from all of our families, from all our community members in a way that's really representative of every family's needs? We know that our multilingual households and our families that are Native American are often underrepresented. So for us as a state, it's thinking about, okay, well, what do we need to do to really get more accurate data and representation? And part of that, when it comes to family engagement, is building trust. So for us, it's not only creating access through workshops and materials for schools and programs, but also thinking about, well, how as a state can we build that relationship with those communities? So one of the projects that we're currently working on that I'm very excited about is hosting now 7, it was 6, regional literacy nights across the state, and really looking at community partners. Who can we bring to the table to meet the different needs and have different activities, but then focusing on that community specifically and working collaboratively. So instead of us just going into that community and saying, here's an activity, we're hosting this event, come. It's working collaboratively with that community, with the school administrators in that community, with community members in that community, to really build this event and hopefully get a higher turnout. So that'll be rolling out in the spring of 2026. That's relevant to you all because it really is that same practice. When you're looking at that data, not just sitting and reading and deciding, but then working collaboratively with your families and saying, we heard question number 3 is often scored the lowest on our Indicator 8 survey. It's, does our school communicate regularly with me about my students' progress? So rather than us just doing things or the school just doing things. It's asking families, well, what does that mean? When you say regularly, okay, you're saying every day, let me communicate why that's not really feasible, but where can we meet halfway? So again, it's problem solving together. And then when we're thinking about high quality evidence-based family and community engagement, really letting families know the benefits of their involvement. So for some of you, if you're leaders, it's getting the buy-in from your team. So that's teachers and paraprofessionals. But then also just, families as well. When you participate in whether that's a survey or coming to school, there are benefits to your student, and then tying that into the hopes and dreams and the vision that they have for their students as they get older. So students' grades improve, students attend school more regularly, there are higher levels of teacher satisfaction, which I think that is clear for everyone across the board, happier teachers, lower rates of teachers leaving, higher quality education, all of those things. Fewer discipline issues inside and out of the classroom. In early childhood education specifically, when we're talking about discipline issues, if you can have some targeted outreach and involvement with the fathers or the paternal figure in the household, then we start seeing some of those discipline issues go down. So that targeted outreach to families, and then specifically to fathers, can have that positive impact in that area. Students also just like school more, and when they like school more and develop that identity as a learner, they're more likely to graduate and go on to college and more likely to enroll in higher level programs. So for families, and I did gang prevention, I've never met a family that says, I can't wait for my child to be, unhappy, unhealthy, incarcerated, any of those things. And I say gang prevention because I think sometimes we have a deficit perspective of our families, and gang prevention is kind of the more extreme areas where we think that, gang affiliated families, it's a cycle that is just inevitable, and that's not true. I grew up in a highly gang affiliated neighborhood. Most of my friends were gang affiliated. I am not gang affiliated. And even for friends back home where their babies, their first picture is like in their colors and their gang colors. Um, Watching their kids grow up, they're on the honor roll and they're celebrating that on social media and they're so excited. So again, even for the families that we might assume don't care or not interested, or that there's some cycle that's going to be repeated, there is not a single family out there that isn't eager and ready to celebrate their kids. So getting that buy-in for families can be, what are your hopes and dreams for your kids? And then this is how we can make sure that that happens as a team. So the four essential core beliefs when it comes to family engagement on behalf of educators, schools, and programs is the belief that all families have dreams for their children and want the best for them. So like I just mentioned, even when it comes to families that have had, generations of, poverty, gang affiliation, substance dependency, no family ever wants their child to be in a situation where they're unhealthy or harmed. Um, Educational neglect does happen. It's 1% or less in Utah, so it's very rare. And there are cases of child abuse, but and this I got from a previous supervisor of mine that was a licensed therapist and social worker. We have to remind ourselves that while, yes, there are exceptions to the rule, there's always going to be outliers. But we have to remember that for the most part, people are good and want good things for their kids. So having, as Mayor Sherry Wood from South Salt Lake would say, yes in your heart, really goes a long way, because it's about that mindset shift and that belief that all families want what's best for their children. Also believing that all families have the capacity to support their children's learning. That might look different. It might not look the way that we expect it to. It might not look like reading a book to their child. It might look like their families sharing stories orally. It might look like families encouraging or explaining these high expectations to their children. You will go to college. You will have a job. And then families and school staff as equal partners. So again, that collaborative relationship, two-way communication. And if you're looking to monitor family engagement, or see how effectively you're implementing family engagement, some things that you can monitor is that frequency of two-way communication. How often are families reaching out to us? What are they reaching out to us about? Are they positive interactions? Are they complaints? all of that is information that you can use to monitor progress towards a family engagement goal. And if there's something specific that you want to talk about, I'm always here and happy to brainstorm. Monitoring our progress as a state towards positive homeschool relationships is something that I love, and that's why I'm in this position, I guess. And then the responsibility for cultivating and sustaining partnerships among school, home, and community rests primarily with school staff, especially school leaders. So, as frustrating as it can be, to host an event and to have low attendance or to feel like families don't care, it really is up to us as a professional to set the stage for families and to make sure that we're creating a structure and a system that's accessible for all families. So, again, low attendance to events. That might be frustrating, but is that also the only way that we're getting engagement or communicating with families? If the information is important enough for us to develop a whole event and spend all this money to try to host, um, then the information should be important enough for us to be able to get out in other ways. So this could be webinars, it could be a recording on our school website, it could be a newsletter, but really just thinking about your population, your demographic, what is it that they've communicated that they want? What is it that they're responsive to? And overall, just having fun with that. Part of the meeting that we had today with the school was Hispanic families are often underrepresented in their response rate. So what can we do? What have other organizations done? The census last time that it happened, used Selena Quintanilla as a part of their branding, and their graphics were all Selena Quintanilla based. And it actually goes back to the census from a few decades ago. As well, but just using those iconic figures that are going to be meaningful for your families, and you can have fun with that. And Selena Quintanilla, there's a new documentary coming out on Monday, and we're all counting down. So finding those things that people are bought into, again, goes a long way. So now we're going to talk about street data, which is really what this whole presentation is about. So street data is the qualitative and experiential data that emerges at eye level and on lower frequencies when we train our brain to discern it. What does that mean? Street data is that information that we're getting that we don't even realize is measurable data, meaningful data, because it's often happening in conversations. It's happening when we run into a family at the grocery store or when they're picking up a student. It's those offhand comments that you remember, but that you don't necessarily see represented in the numbers all the time. So while we have quantitative data, and quantitative data is important, qualitative data helps us to better understand that quantitative data because it tells us a story that's in between those numbers. So it's asset-based. It can highlight the things that are going right, because you're getting that praise from families, but it can also highlight the areas where there's potential growth. Some folks like Lisa Wisham at the Utah Education Policy Center calls it sticky note data. And it's really, when I was in a preschool program, I used to carry a notebook in my back pocket. That's where I used to write down like observations of students. What are they doing? What were they able to do today? But then also just comments that I got not from just students, but from their families as well. And it's those things that you take back to your planning meetings or to data discussions and say, okay, well, this is where we are as far as this quantitative piece, this assessment piece, but then this is also what families are saying. So when we're looking at, for example, attendance rates, why are families not coming on Friday? Okay, we know that Fridays quantitatively there's lower attendance because it's a half day. We can try to just do things to get kids here, whether that's disciplinary consequences. Some people have said, a fee for chronic absenteeism, which I don't recommend. Research does not back that up. And it also just harms relationships with students and families and creates additional barriers for them financially. But again, if you're looking at that quantitative data and you're just going to try things to get attendance up on Fridays, you can do that. But if you look at that qualitative data, what families are saying, then you're going to get some other strategies that are going to better inform what program or policy you develop. So for example, again, using that example of Friday attendance, if families are saying, well, it's just inconvenient for me to take my kid to school for only 3 or 4 hours. I work a full-time job and I don't have anyone else to help me. That's a piece that's not going to show up numerically. Or childcare might come up as well. Just all of those things that are going to better inform your next steps. Um, First, People's Principles of Learning. So this comes from the First Nations Education Steering Committee. There's a link at the bottom, and you all have access to these slides, so you can go to this resource if you want to. But when it comes to qualitative data, it is again going back to some for some of us, like ancestral ways of knowledge, the things that we know that maybe aren't always clearly written out in like research or in textbooks, but they're still valuable knowledge. And so sharing that with families too, that knowledge comes in a lot of different ways. And is passed down in a lot of different ways. One, that's a strength-based approach, and then also to you're validating families and empowering them to be engaged and empowered. But learning ultimately supports the well-being of the self, the family, the community, the land, the spirits, and the ancestors. So we're all going to do better if we're supporting each other. What we do for one person to help that person is ultimately going to have ripple effects that's going to strengthen our whole community. And that's really for the good of all. Also making sure that we're attentive to our own responses and our own experiences, and appreciating that learning is holistic. It's a whole body, whole person approach that requires you to be able to reflect, to be reflexive, to experiment and really look at relationships. So how does this knowledge or this experience or this learning experience connect me to others by connecting me to this piece of knowledge, and looking at that I'm not even gonna try to say it anymore, reciprocal relationships and a sense of place. So again, by me learning something about the Great Salt Lake, for example, is that going to benefit me or is that going to benefit my community? I know that when I learn different things about the Great Salt Lake, it activates me to do something that's ultimately going to benefit my community as well, and not just me. Learning also involves the recognition that there is consequences to one's actions. So everything that we do or that we don't do does have consequences. Um, and lack of engagement is a form of engagement in a weird way, right? It's still an action by people not taking action, and that's going to have consequences. So part of family engagement is letting families know that when there is an engagement on their behalf, there is still a consequence. Even if they think it's a neutral, nothing is ever neutral. By not doing something, there's still consequences that come with that. And then learning involves generational roles and responsibilities. So looking at those intergenerational models of learning, especially for some of our refugee families, for example, where there are multiple generations living in a household, how can we leverage that knowledge and how can we bring them in? So for some of our programs, we look at bringing in grandparents to read books, for example, or to lead activities or to tell stories. Um, and those are positive experiences for our students and then also for our families as well. Some additional components, learning recognizes the roles of Indigenous knowledge. So again, that oral storytelling, histories, that students really help them get to know themselves and their relationship with their community. Also looking at how learning is embedded in memory, history, and story. Again, oral storytelling, it's my favorite thing. But then also some research has shown that even when we're not taught or told something, there's epigenetics and there's also just our intuitive responses. So those are all strengths that you can be brought into the space to engage students, but then also to empower families to bring them in. Some conversations there might be my mom is from El Salvador, for example, and her story with the Civil War in El Salvador. It's an important historical point, not only in El Salvador, but for the US as well. So talking to families about how their history with immigration, their history, as a young person growing up, is impactful to tie something that is going to relate to US history. So it's bringing the home and the school together, if that makes sense. Um, Also reminding ourselves that learning involves patience and time. That applies for everyone at all ages and stages. And then learning requires exploration of one's identity. So again, by bringing in families, you're helping to develop a positive learning identity by reinforcing that personal identity and that social identity as well. And then learning involves recognizing that some knowledge is sacred and only shared with permission and or in certain situations. The best example I can give here is I'm in a doctoral program. And my research interest, for example, is I was thinking about doing an autoethnography, and I'm no longer not doing that. But the topic remains the same, and it's just about how much can we share or do we want to share, while also teaching someone. And my topic is on just the culture of education and welcoming and belonging, and respectability politics. We can talk about that more offline. That's just an example here. But how much can we share and do we want to share to really help someone gain a skill or get to the next step in their learning journey? And then a comprehensive picture. So street data helps to fill in the gaps, provide clarity, and provide the story behind the quantitative data. We've talked about this already as far as when we're looking at that quantitative piece, we're getting information. And while you can develop things there, you can develop programs, buy curriculum, train, all of those things. Um, it is a recommendation that you also dig deeper. And by digging deeper, I mean getting some of those oral pieces, that qualitative piece, to really deepen your understanding. So that way you're investing your time, energy, and potentially your money in spaces and in places that are going to be more effective. Data can also be humanizing, which is the key point with street data. It's looking at this person is not just a number or this response on a survey. It's this person is a person first, and they're providing us their time and their input, which is invaluable. We have to remember that even if we don't like that response, it's still a response, and we still have a responsibility to make sure that we're looking at it and incorporating it into our next steps with our programming, our lessons, and our policies. Because data, when we're trying to humanize someone, it's again this, it's not just the student isn't reading at grade level, is this student needs to learn so that they can read at grade level and be a healthy adult in the future. And also, why are they not reading at grade level? Is it because of their home situation? Is it family? Is it a disability? What is it? So that we can properly support the student as a whole person, as an individual. All right. So setting clear and meaningful goals. When we're looking at street data, this framework, the first step is identifying why do we want street data and why now? And especially if you've never really looked at that sticky note data or collected sticky note data or used it in an intentional way in a data meeting, really identifying how is this going to help us grow as a school or program? Why does it matter? And then being very clear with your team, with each other, and with yourself about why you're going to use it and not doing it just because you think you should. Street data, while it is sometimes informal, should be done, implemented in an intentional way, in association with a goal. I'm so sorry. I think I'm getting sick, so my voice is starting to struggle. It's about leading for equity and then avoiding equity traps and tropes. So what does that mean? Again, it's about doing things in an intentional way aligned with a goal, identifying why street data is going to help us engage. So why might you want to participate in gathering street data? It's because we don't have a full picture, and I want to know why, because I want to implement this program in a meaningful and successful way. Part two is choosing the margins. This is where we find ways to get participation or provide accessible ways for all voices to be heard. So this is where you consider who is not responding to your surveys and why, and then thinking about what strategies can be used to get information from those who are not participating in the survey collection process. This might also be like a focus group, for example, to reevaluate the way that you're collecting feedback. This is something that we did in partnership with the Utah Parent Center for our Indicator 8 parent involvement survey. Initially, it was to see, do we rewrite these questions so that they make more sense? And while that's still something that we're looking at and thinking about doing, it also brought up some other points about, I don't even know what these terms mean. Which bigger picture, if a family doesn't know what procedural safeguard means, it's not just about the survey, it's about a practice that we're doing in our schools. It's about a practice that we're doing as a state and just as a country as well. And what can we do to make sure that that language is more accessible? So we've identified some strategies there and supporting our schools to implement some of those strategies by making things more explicit and more clear for families. Um, how they're facilitating the IEP, for example, is another example there. But really looking at just what are we doing with this practice and what can we do to make sure that we're on the ground doing the work and not just, in an abstract way. Part three is looking at deepening the learning by redefining success. So you're building coherence and you're making learning public. This step can look like you're gathering input, you're gathering data, you're explaining the why. Why does this data matter? And then the second piece, so imagine there's a bulletin board. Step one, you're gathering, explaining the why. Step two, you're sharing. This is what you said. And then step three is now you're sharing, you're being transparent about how that information was used. So not only are you being transparent and showing that the data collected was meaningful, you're using it, you did something with it and about it. It's also communicating to families that didn't respond or didn't engage, hey, we actually did something with this. For the next survey, you should participate because we're going to listen. We're going to take action based on your input. So when families see that, if they weren't bought in, or they didn't participate because sometimes they just don't know where that information is going. Do I want to spend 5 or 10 minutes completing the survey if it's not going to matter? Everyone's busy and I think overloaded. I don't complete surveys anymore, even when there's a promise of a $25 Amazon gift card or a chance to go to Universal Studios. It's just not worth it for me. My brain is done by the time it's 5 o'clock. And so it's again making it meaningful, making sure that they know it's important and how that information is going to be used. That transparency stage and sharing what you did with the feedback collected is necessary. It's not a step that can be skipped or overlooked because this is when you collaboratively set goals based on the information collected. So what did the community say? What was important, needed and meaningful. And then part four, it is about transforming the culture. So this is where you embrace vulnerability. This is where you say, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't think about that, or I've never thought about it that way. That phrase of I've never thought about it that way is so important when communicating with families. And this goes beyond just street data. This can go into having difficult conversations or conversations, period. There's actually a whole book and I want to say the author's name is Monica. Can't remember her last name, but it's a yellow cover. I've never thought about it that way. And just that statement, when you have opposing viewpoints or you're having a difficult conversation, being willing to be flexible in your thinking and say, I've never considered that. Doesn't mean you have to change, your values or your thoughts or anything. Doesn't even mean you have to agree. It's just about taking on a different perspective and being vulnerable in that sense. So transforming the culture by embracing vulnerability and calling folks in and up to equity. What does that mean? It means I'm not going to be angry at you if you say something that I disagree with. I'm not going to eliminate or exclude you because you say something I disagree with. I'm going to call you in to want to work collaboratively, to meet halfway at least, and then to collaboratively build something new that's going to meet our needs and make progress for our kids. And that's where that up to equity comes in because we want to make sure that we're building equitable systems by having all voices represented. And just reframing failure as opportunity. So when you're working with human beings, it's never going to be a magic bullet. Things change, people change, generations change. And all we can do is just try, make evidence-based decisions and continue forward. And if that means that sometimes the things that we try fail, well, then that's just the nature of the work. And that's just inevitable because again, we're human beings. Failure is just a part of life. Actually working, where did I hear this? It was, I think, at a training, um, or a book that I was reading, one of the two. It was research based. But the student said, I wish someone had taught me how to fail. Oftentimes in that K through 12 space, preschool, I love preschool. That's why I went there. And then after school, because you get messy and you can fail and you try again. That K through 12 space, me as a perfectionist, for example, we do not like failure. We shy away from it. or we're really hard on ourselves, but failure is where we really get to grow. So reframing again, that failure is an opportunity to try again and do better, and doing that with our families, because community is really what keeps us going. And then monitoring progress towards your goals. So this can look like, it doesn't have to be a survey. It could be pulse checks. Pulse checks are what teachers are usually doing already in their classroom. It can be a thumbs up, thumbs down, a rosebud thorn. It could be an exit ticket, a deal wall. It's just all of those quick ways that you can easily get information from families, where you can easily assess, like, did this workshop, was it meaningful to families? Did we achieve our goal, and our learning intention? Um, and or did families just even feel like it was a good use of their time? So, one thing here that I really want to point out is that when it comes to our goals, it doesn't have to be a numerical, quantitative, assessment-based goal. It could be measuring a family's level of confidence. It can be attendance data. It could be how much do families enjoy this. Um, all of those different things. What is your goal? What is it that you're trying to obtain? And then what are the ways that we can see it or know that it happened? So again, it could be observable as well. Um, when we're talking about a multi-tiered system of approach for family engagement and when we're looking at that progress, first thing we're looking at is that frequency of an intervention. So home visits, it's one example, and home visits can happen at a tier one level where everyone has the option of receiving a home visit, or it can happen at a tier two or a tier one where more home visits are conducted for families if there's a higher need. So, for example, if you're delivering literacy materials or working with families on a set goal, maybe the home visits are happen more frequently. Tier one is the families need more frequent check-ins because maybe they're in need of more resources. Families in a crisis situation. How often are you having to deliver that intervention is a one indicator that you can look at to measure progress towards a goal. So again, if we're looking at the frequency of a home visit, is were we able to decrease the level or the number of home visits because not as many families needed a tier two or a tier one, or a tier three. Sorry, I've been saying that wrong. But we've been able to do everyone at a tier one. Everyone just gets this amount because everyone's pretty stable and they don't need as much as they did before. You can also look at the intensity of an intervention. So this is looking at, for example, like what is the level of support that a family is needing? Are they needing, a general workshop, or are they needed like a targeted one-on-one mentor model, family spirit? That's an example of what might be a one-on-one. They work with first-time mothers. So it could be open for all. They do one general, but then if someone needs some more targeted intervention and more consistent check-ins, then that might be that one-on-one. So that intensity of an intervention changes, and also the type of an intervention. So while some families might be okay with just, that one-on-one phone call home, maybe some families do need that home visit because that's the only way to be able to reach them. So those are all different types of ways to monitor progress, different goals that you can set. Um, the goals can also be quarterly, so you can look at things quarterly as a team. We already mentioned event and exit tickets. Could be ongoing. It could be, a cohort based. There's really a lot of really creative ways to look at progress and to think about progress and the way that we're implementing different strategies. One thing that might be difficult, but that I wish that we could do better at monitoring is again that frequency of communication from the home to the school. Because when we were talking about two-way communication, okay, that's great, but how do we measure that? So if there's like a way to tally that, if you have a smaller classroom or phone calls to the teacher, maybe the teacher keeps a record of how many times the family reaches out. Because again, that two-way communication is essential for family engagement. And then you want to be able to really just monitor that and measure that. So it could be a tally sheet, it could be an Excel sheet, any one of those things. Academic and discipline, I think, are easier to measure because those are things that we usually like document or report. But just a reminder to not end there, to really dig deep and not just look at the number of incidents, but really get the story behind those numbers. And then before I move on, because I'm almost done and this went by really quickly, you all might get out early, but just what are some questions or thoughts? I don't know if there's a Q&A. I think I saw one. But are there any Q&A? And I don't think y'all could put anything in the chat because I've been looking. Christina or James, was there anything in the Q&A? Is there a Q&A? Maybe that's the question I should be asking. All right, well, I can't find a Q&A and I don't think y'all can chat, so I'm sorry. But the next slide is the slide that I'm most excited about. So when it comes to continuous improvement, that really is what we do all day, every day. When we think we're done, we come back to one. Y'all know this song, sing it with me. Just kidding, I'm not gonna sing. But really, it never ends. The work never ends. Hopefully that means job stability. But it really is right when we think we're at the point of celebration, something else comes up or things change or people change. And the work is just never ends. So celebrate every step of the way, every milestone that you hit. Celebrate the little things. This job is hard. It's overwhelming. I brought up game prevention. Game prevention was very easy compared to early childhood. Um, Small kids have unfiltered emotions and very low tolerance to hold them back. So, um, that was my favorite piece. That was my favorite piece was seeing those kids with their unfiltered rage start to manage those breathing exercises. I once made a box for one of my kids. I was like, this is your box that you can destroy. You can go in it, you can destroy it. This is the thing that you can destroy. And it worked. It was good. But yeah, it's just what are those strategies that we can use in celebrating those little things. Today, they didn't hit me, they hit their box. That was a celebration for me. So with that said, we have a lot of different opportunities here at the USBE when it comes to education resources and learning opportunities. Again, y'all have these slides so you can download them and just click on the hyperlinks. You can also go on our USBE webpage. So Cassie Hayes oversees our parent portal page, and that's got some general stuff and a lot of different resources. And then if you go to one of the drop-down menus, and I'm forgetting which one, but there's a page that says school improvement with parent and family engagement. And that's the webpage that I oversee. It also has a lot of resources for educators, for schools and programs, some announcements. Constantly trying to update it, trying to create different resources and tools that you all can use. So I highly recommend that you bookmark it or at least check it out and explore. Um, Trying to get stuff translated because I know we have bilingual staff and then also families that probably want to look at our resources. So that's a goal that we have. And then currently we have two trainings. So there's the Revised Back to Basics course. It's listed on Midas. If you don't have a Midas account, you can still participate. Just send me an email. The Midas course for Back to Basics has listed different dates. You don't have to attend all of the different dates. You only have to attend one, and then there's options to attend either online or in person. It is all day. It goes to at least three, depending on the size of the group that we have, because we do have a lot of communication with each other. We have conversations and we look at our data. And then the other course, this one's an asynchronous course. It's a family and community engagement trainer certification. It's about 40 hours of training. You do it on your own time, and then it's on Canvas. If you don't have a Canvas account, we can get you set up with one. And then also you can get credit for it as well if you want to. This course, you do offer like a mini training for someone. If that's not something that you can do, there are alternative options. And we can talk about that one-on-one and see what works best for you. But with this, the certification, you just get the foundations. and some deeper information so you can go and train others. You can do that, you know, if you wanted to now. But there are some key pieces that as a state we noticed people were talking about things differently, defining family engagement in different ways, and we wanted to have a uniform understanding. So the certification helps us have that shared language, that shared understanding as a state so that we can move forward and talk about things in a way that's going to make sense to all of us. But then also, if, you know, for whatever reason, a policymaker were to talk to us, they're hearing the same thing, the same language, so that way we have a shared understanding. And I lost my mouse. And then finally, this is my contact information. So again, my name is Susie Estrada. I'm the School Improvement Programs and Special Education Parent Engagement Specialist with the USBE. This is my email. Email works best for contacting me. I try to answer the phone, but there's a lot of meetings and different things. So it's easier for me to miss that phone call. But if you email me, I will respond to you usually same day, if not the very next day. And with that said, that is my last slide. I ended 15 minutes early because I thought we would have conversation opportunities. But that is okay. I will be around. If there's any questions, I still don't see a Q&A, but maybe I'm just not seeing it. Or any comments, you're welcome to put them in the chat.